Working with police hand to hand. The citizens need to be highly security conscious and to know things that are happening around their communities. Communities need to be secured. If you don't secure the communities, the urban areas will be secure.
Community policing has always improved the trust the citizens have for the police to some extent. In Omar here for News Central, Chinwe Ugeli.
Thank you very much, Chinwe Ugeli, for that report. We're moving away from there to talk about what's been going on with the NNPCL. So much has happened in that area, and we're going to be talking about it shortly.
Now, first, the NNPCL published its annual net profit of 3.3 trillion naira. This comes from the oil firm informed, or rather comes as the oil firm informed the Federal Account Allocation Committee, FAC, of an outstanding payment of 4.56 trillion naira for selling petrol at a subsidized price between August 2023 and June 2024. The chief financial officer of the NNPCL, Alhaji Umar Ajia, disclosed that the government pays the company to sell PMS at half price of the landing cost, what he calls shortfall.
This comes as Nigerians grapple with soaring petrol prices and widespread scarcity, while the firm currently responsible for importing petrol into Nigeria, NNPC Retail, controversially changed its ownership. NNPC Retail, the downstream arm of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, has ceased to exist after a court-approved transfer of its ownership and assets to OVH Energy Marketing Limited, a company it claimed to have acquired. NNPCL bought OVH from New Oil Energy Limited a month after New Oil Energy acquired OVH in September 2022. However, it has been revealed that the purchase company OVH Energy has essentially taken over the management of its buyer, the NNPC retailer. This development has been described by an NNPC insider as the most ridiculous business acquisition in the world. Lots of complications regarding that, but let's take a look at this video.
I think there is one fact that I need to make very clear, that in the last 8 or 9 years, this company, even corporation as it were, has not paid anybody a dime or 1 naira as subsidy. No one has been paid kobo by NNPC as in the name of subsidy. That means no marketer has received money from us by way of subsidy. What has been happening is that we've been importing PMS, landing at a certain price, at a cost price, and the government is telling us to sell it at half price. So the delta between that landed price and the half price is what we call shortfall, or call it subsidy. And the deal is between Federation and ourselves to reconcile, and sometimes they give us money, sometimes we do net ups. So there is no money exchanging hands to any marketer or anybody in the name of subsidy.
So many complications, interesting perspectives, but we hope to get some clarity with our guests joining. We're joined by the Chief Economist at SPM Professionals, Paul Alaje. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you so very much for having me.
We'll also be joined by an energy expert and the co-founder of the CEO of Dairy Hills, Kelvin Emmanuel. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's begin the conversation with Mr. Alaje and hope that you can maybe help us with some clarity regarding the NNPC Retail and OVH. NNPC has given their own reports, even though there have been claims of OVH, NNPC Retail Limited initially purchasing OVH and OVH initially purchasing NNPC Retail Limited. But they're starting to see that we're starting to hear about some mergers having happened, and that is not the image that is being presented to the public. So I don't know if you have some clarity regarding that and you can help us with that.
Well, the information in the public domain indicates that the NNPC had acquired the OVH, but the circumstances around it is not as clear as one would expect. So, but what is also clear is that OVH is the one managing the retail arm of NNPC. And as one would have expected that NNPC, with the capacity and what is expected, all the activity would have been done directly by the NNPC. Unfortunately, this is not the case this time, this moment. And I think that what we call unbundling was not properly done. And when you look at the Petroleum Industry Act, I doubt if what we are currently seeing is obtainable.
All right. I'm hoping that, there's still further clarity regarding that. But I just want to react or quote something from the NNPC statement that they put on their X page. They said, and I quote, they refer to it as a merger. They said the first step of merging NNPC Retail Limited into OVH has been completed, and the post-merger renaming as NNPC Retail Limited is ongoing. So a number of confusions regarding that. Is it a merger, or was there actually an acquisition that happened? Was it a situation of NNPC actually purchasing OVH, or is it really a merger and maybe not something to worry as much about? Mr.
Well, if it's a merger, the literature is very obvious. It is when two organizations come together because each of them have unique competencies. So when they come together, then we call it a merger. But when decide to buy the entire shares of another, then that's an acquisition. So if NNPC is saying they have a merger, that means OVH has some shares in NNPC or in the retail section of NNPC. But when you check who owns the larger proportion of NNPCL today, NNPCL is also a private organization. And that is why I said, beyond what is going on in the media space, we need to look at the papers regarding NNPC and OVH. And until we have that accurate information, what we are doing will just be gainsay, because NNPC has given even room for more confusion. The first publication talks about merger. The first publication talks about acquisition. The recent publication is talking about merger. Obviously, these two are not the same thing. So until we know for a certainty what actually happened between the two, then we might have a lot to worry about beyond what we are currently concerned now.
All right. We're going to go to Mr. Emmanuel in a bit. So apologies, Mr. Emmanuel, just hold on. Mr. Alajed, I wanted you to also speak on the little details that we're not highlighting here, of course, erupting mostly from Atiku Abubakar's accusations. And if you have read through the report, there is a claim that there's a court ruling, basically. They went to court, they have, of course, transferred all their shares and acquisitions for NNPC Retail to OVH. So initially it sounded like the NNPC had purchased OVH, but then OVH now controls NNPC Retail's shares and all its, legally, all its, basically it controls a lot of its shares. So that's where there's a confusion here, that one person had initially bought the other, but now it seems that the other owns the one who initially bought it. And that may have led to conversations concerning these petrol scarcity, who really is now in control of importing petrol into Nigeria. Is it OVH or is it NNPC? So do you understand where the confusion is? And can you provide some clarity here?
Yes, so for me, it goes beyond the reason for petrol scarcity. The truth is that even when we settle this ownership structure and you have even NNPC, you will still have petrol scarcity, because the system that we run is not efficient. So you're going to have petrol scarcity. It means government current policies, it's just going to be from time to time. And I've also read part of what the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar put in public domain. And I can tell you that beyond what has happened, what I noticed and what I read, it's as though NNPC claims they bought OVH, even though it's against what is different from what NNPC put on their eggs. So, but at the same time, if you are bought, is it that they bought it with the management and asked the management to continue running the NNPC retail section for them? If that be the case, then we need to now ask, where is merger coming from? And if they are bought, is with how much? You see, it's only in Nigeria that most of these activity, they are done in secrecy. My opinion, we need an external forensic auditor to look into the books of NNPC. Not until that, there will be a lot of guessing, misinformation, insufficient information that will dominate the public space.
All right. I'm glad that you've brought on the leadership aspect, and I'm going to bring in our next guest to talk about that. I'm also going to make reference to the speech or the publication by the NNPC. Number 8 on the press release of the NNPC, that the press release they released on their X page. It says, the management of NNPC Limited, under the leadership of Mele Kyari, has done very well in growing the company's fortunes, as shown in the 2023 audited financial statement, where it's reported at 3.3 trillion naira as profit after tax. And, you know, this is something that has been like a big story. So I'm going to bring in Kevin into the conversation. Kevin Emmanuel, so far, do you agree with the position of the NNPC that Mele Kyari has done really well? And how important is it, this 3.3 trillion naira in profits that they have announced or disclosed as at 2023 or 2023 profits? How important is this in the grand scheme of things?
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I was just going to mention about the OVH and NPC story, that about 3 years ago, Owando finished divestment from OVH. OVH actually means Owando, Vitol, and Ilios. And that divestment over the years was in the ratio of 60%, 35%, and 5%. And Owando had done that divestment to raise funds several years ago to finance his acquisition of ConocoPhillips assets upstream, when ConocoPhillips, the American producer that is competitor to the likes of Chevron and ExxonMobil in the US, was exiting Nigeria. Owando needed to raise cash. And they had done that divestment to add to over $1 billion they needed to put up to be able to finance that acquisition. And it was able to raise cash from some other means to, but that acquisition didn't quite pan out the way they had expected. So,
Mr. Emmanuel, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, we would like that you speak up, just speak up a little bit more so we can hear you better.
Yes. I said Owando kept his name brand as a probably like a lease of his name for a period that will extend until September of 2024, next month, and before the lease of his name will expire, and they will have to remove his name from that OVH merger of their downstream business that they no longer hold because they have divested fully from it. But I have always maintained that, listen, according to the PIA, the Petroleum Industry Act says that NNPC is not supposed to control more than 30% of the downstream sector. But you've seen a situation where NNPC controls most of the downstream sector because a lot of independent marketers are unable to access FX to import and compete with NNPC, And this is the reason why I say, look, there are 15 subsidiaries in NNPC. There are only 6 that are important. NNPC is not supposed to be in the retail business. NNPC is supposed to stay in the midstream and in the upstream business. There are several areas like gas and power, like new energy, I also do not think that the government should be in the business of refining petrol and other derivatives. I think the government-owned refineries should be sold to private sector businesses to manage, because government has no business doing business. And you've seen over the years, they spent 12 trillion trying to do turnaround maintenance on those refineries, and it's not yielded anything so far. And they keep moving dates, and Nigerians can't see anything. Now, to the question you asked, the 2.1 trillion naira dividend that they declared to the government has already been spent. It's paper profit. So there's no situation where you see that the Consolidated Revenue Fund, Federal Account Allocation Committee that belongs to the federating units, federal, state, and local government are going to say, oh, you know what, NNPC paid us 2.1 trillion naira dividend. There's no situation like that. I have maintained that, for example, since January of this year, NNPC has not remitted royalty for proceeds to the federation account for the factor appropriate and share amongst its members. And NNPC denied it. They said that, we've been paying taxes. We're one of the highest paying tax institutions in Nigeria. And I said, taxes are not the same with royalties, because NNPC owns the FGN's share of assets upstream. And according to their balance sheet, that is worth over 200 trillion naira, about 240 trillion naira or so, If you look at the deep offshore, if you look at the midshore, you look at the onshore business, they own about 55% in cumulative average of oil and gas assets upstream. So they represent the federal government.
Oh,
So
we're struggling with your audio. For some reason, your voice sounds very low and very muffled. So we'd appreciate if you can help us maybe speak up. Whilst we're trying to sort out your audio, let's bring in Mr. Laje into the conversation as well. And I'm going to ask you the same question that I had asked Kevin earlier. What do you think about the 3.3 trillion naira profits that NNPC had declared? Is it something to be excited about? Is it something that matters in the grand scheme of things, especially looking at the current reality? The average Nigerian doesn't understand that. So what does that really mean?
Okay, so I will speak to four things regarding the 3.3 trillion. Now, when you call it trillion, it looks humongous. But you won't convert this to dollar, it becomes $2.1 billion. $2.1 billion for NNPC in 2023 is far abysmal. And you can look at their contemporary around the world, then you know that NNPC performed quite poorly. Now, that 3.3 trillion, when you convert it to what it was in 2022, with the exchange rate, average exchange rate of the year, that 3.3 trillion will become 1.8 trillion. When you in fact convert it to 2021, then that 3.3 trillion will be a loss to 2021. Why? Because even though we did barely 674 billion, but when you look at the exchange rate of about 400 official window in 2021, and you look at what we had in 2023 at about 1,600, then you know that it was a better yesterday. And when you convert it to 2020, then you can do the math. So here is it. What makes NNPC should actually declare their profit in US dollar, because most of their activities are done in hard currency. So that said, where is the money? And this is very important we understand. I don't think this money is somewhere saved in the bank where the government will say, go and use that money and pay now. I believe most of the money, if not all, had been spent. And what is important is just to get a directive so that we can formalize what has already been done. So for me, 3.3 trillion naira in 2023 is quite poor. Not because the money don't look good on paper, but what we are talking about is merely $2.1 billion.
All right. Then, of course, interesting way to put it. The one question that you asked there is, where's the money? Everyone, of course, is asking the same questions. And that's why there have been calls to open up the NNPC's books. Let's know exactly what's going on. Let's know where, Nigeria's money is going, how much the company is earning, if there's any mismanagement of funds over there. I'm going to bring back Kelvin Emmanuel and see if we can hear him better now. I want you to speak on the idea of subsidy. NNPC, of course, requested that its earnings would not be remitted to the Federation account. It would rather use that money to pay off, subsidy earnings in 2022-2024. So quickly react to that. There's a lot of, or rather lack of clarity with regards to the subsidy payment system. Are we still paying subsidy? Or are we paying shortfall as they've described it? Is there questions that must be answered by the current administration?
Well, I don't know if you can hear me now. Is it better now?
Yeah, we can. I think you just need to speak up more. Yeah.
Okay, so there were only 2 months in 2023 when Nigeria did not pay subsidy. And that was when the US dollar was still hovering around $800, 800 naira to $1, 770, 800 naira to $1 in the markets. And you saw that there was like the first time like the official and parallel market trade aligned, and the black market premium was below 5%. And for the months of June and July in 2023, Nigeria did not pay subsidy. But when crude oil price started going up and you started seeing that black market premium widen above the recommended 5%, and it started going up above 800 to 900, and then it went to 1,000, and it started screaming, and it went above 1,000 and continued. then the government had to introduce back subsidy, which the group CFO, Mr. Alhaji Ajia, said it's FX differential. They just do not want to call it subsidy. And what you've seen basically is a situation where in the midstream space and downstream space, the importation of PMS, you've seen a situation where international traders control 75% of the markets. The likes of Vitol, for example, which is in that OVH triangle, they are in that mix. They are one of the international traders. And Metrics Energy controls 25% of it. And if you remember, there was a news story recently about Russia and Malta, Russia and Lume to Nigeria, off-spec petrol to Malta, blending, bring to Nigeria. NNPC takes off most of that. And it comes to the markets in Nigeria, issues around quality, specifications of the petrol. Since, like I said, since January of 2024, NNPC has not remitted revenues or proceeds due to the federation accounts through NUPRC less than 4% since January of 2024. The PIA says that 70% of that proceeds is supposed to be remitted to the federation account, 20% is supposed to be kept as retained earnings by NNPC, 10% is supposed to be credited to the Frontier Basin Exploration Fund. So you have a situation basically where NNPC takes the dividends due to the federation account, from example, NLNG, and they don't remit it to the federation account. For the 2023 financial year, NLNG paid a dividend. It's not been remitted to the federation account. NNPC has advised the Ministry of Finance that it's going to use that to reconcile subsidy. Now, here are my issues with that. Number one, NNPC is a nominee for the federal government of Nigeria on the board of NLNG, where it holds 49%. The assets in NLNG is supposed to be warehoused with the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated, not NNPC. NNPC does not have constitutional power to hold back the dividends that is due to the federation account, because the federation is not just the federal government, it's the federal, state, and local governments. So what the Nigerian Governors Forum and the Association of Local Government of Nigeria decides to do with that is up to them, really. I think I am aware the NGF has appointed an auditor to check the reconciliation of that. I don't know what the auditor has brought to the NGF so far. Number two, NNPC is supposed to generate enough revenue from royalty oil to be able to sort out any reconciliation it's doing downstream for under recovery on subsidy payments. Okay. Number three, Nigeria doesn't consume 70 million liters of PMS like the government says they do. And I've always challenged the government, please provide empirical evidence to show that the number of generators, tricycles, motor vehicles, and the population of Nigeria, because you consider the fact that 12 years ago, Nigeria was consuming between 22 and 24 million liters of PMS on a daily basis. So how can you explain to Nigeria that in 12 years, with the population growing at 30% per year, Nigeria has jumped from 22 million to 24 million to 70 million?
There's obviously so much that needs to be unpacked. And I don't know that we will ever get answers to these questions if we do not have an administration that is serious. All right, quickly, please. So we need to go back to the Sanaja.
Just one more important point to complete this web. NNPC owes international traders who control 75% of the market, $6.8 billion today, as we speak. And you have modified carrier agreements where there are vendor transactions for 30 to 90 days, right? Outside of which the trader is obligated to apply LIBOR plus country risk premium. And that currently stands between 6.5 to 7%, on that loan. NNPC has not been able to pay. That's why you're seeing issues with scarcity of petrol in Nigeria. And it's my guess that if the domestic refineries don't come to save the day next month, we might have more biting scarcity in Nigeria. NNPC wants to borrow another $2 billion and securitize and a well upstream to be able to draw down on that loan it owes to traders. You know, I just think that, listen, the financial engineering on which you reconcile royalty from upstream under domestic crude oil supply obligations, crude oil intervention,
all right,
allocation of 445,000 barrels and reconciliation of downstream debt. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense.
All right, Mr. Emmanuel.
Yeah,
Mr. Emmanuel, you know, because we need to wrap up the conversation in a bit and go back to, let's go back to Paul Alaje. Oliver, I think you want to throw something.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask something that Mr. Emmanuel had referred to about the NNPC not having the constitutional powers to be able to withhold money from the Federation or withhold, you know, the money that should be returned to the Federation account. Does the presidency have the right to give them the permission to do so? Because that's what the report says.
I don't think so. The act is very clear. The NNPCL has to remit what the act, the Petroleum Industry Act, has specified. So having a directive from the president, I don't think is sufficient for NNPC to act against what the act has mentioned. And to my mind, if this NNPC is truly limited, I don't think politicians should be the one to appoint the leadership of NNPC. I strongly believe it should have come from private sector, or it should have had the input of the other entities such as state and local government in it. I must also add that when we are taking decisions to share revenues that come from NNPC, and indeed what affects the entire federation, representative of state may not be sufficient. We may need to have representative of local government. They have an umbrella body, and that is where those key decisions should be taken. If such directive should have come at worst case scenario, at fact, where we have the federal and the state executive meeting together, they may make such decision to say that use this to defray some of the outstanding. Then that point, it will make more sense.
All right. Well, time will tell. You know, I know that there's still a lot to unpack with regards to the OVH deal. Atiku Abubakar, of course, you know, made some strong allegations with regards to the ownership of OVH and the interest of the, you know, possible interest of persons in the Nigerian government, including, of course, Mr. President. And those are really, really strong allegations that I don't think would just fade away, but we'll see.
Well, they've denied it, but...
Well, yeah, in the next couple of days, we'll see, you know, how things turn out. Paul Alaje, thank you very much for joining us. Kevin Emmanuel, thanks also for your time.